Claire Weller's hands shook as she dialed the number she swore she'd never use. The private line of Raphael Moretti, the man she'd loved for 3 desperate months before discovering he wasn't just a wealthy businessman, but the head of Seattle's most dangerous crime family. That was 18 months ago. She'd vanished the day she found out, carrying his child without his knowledge. Now her 10-month-old son lay dying of pediatric leukemia, and the oncologists were unanimous. Without the father's complete genetic history, Noah had maybe 3 months to live. One call, one truth. One man she'd spent a year and a half running from. The phone rang twice, and his voice, smooth, controlled, unmistakable, answered. Claire. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this story, please hit the like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. Now, let's dive into Claire's impossible choice. Maya said, the Seattle rain hit the window of Claire Weller's cramped Queen Anne apartment like thrown gravel, relentless and cold. She sat at her kitchen table, a second-hand IKEA piece that wobbled when you leaned on it, with her phone face down beside a stack of medical bills that had long since stopped fitting in the folder. The overhead light buzzed, the refrigerator hummed, and Noah, her 10-month-old son, slept in the nursery down the hall, his breathing monitored by a machine that beeped every 30 seconds to confirm his heart was still fighting. Claire's coffee had gone cold an hour ago. She hadn't noticed. Her attention was fixed on a single business card she'd kept hidden in the back of her wallet for 18 months, buried behind expired grocery coupons and a library card she never used. The card was matte black with embossed silver lettering, R. Moretti, private, and below it, a phone number with no area code, no company name, no explanation. Just a lifeline she'd sworn she would never pull. She turned it over in her fingers, the edges worn soft from the number of times she'd almost thrown it away. Almost. But some part of her, the part that remembered the way he'd smiled at her across a dim bar, the way his hand had felt steady and warm against the small of her back, the way he'd made her feel like the only person in the world for 3 brilliant, stupid months, had kept it, just in case. Well, this was the case. Claire picked up her phone, flipped the card once more, and dialed before she could talk herself out of it. It rang twice. Then his voice, smooth and controlled, filled her ear like whiskey over ice. Claire. Not a question. A statement, as if he'd been waiting. Her throat closed. She forced words through it anyway. Rafe. Silence. Not empty. Waited. She could almost see him, standing in some sleek office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, expensive suit tailored to perfection, dark eyes narrowing as he calculated every possible reason she might be calling after vanishing without a word a year and a half ago. I need something, she said, hating how small her voice sounded. Clearly. His tone didn't shift. Still calm, still in control. Or you wouldn't have called. She closed her eyes and saw Noah's face, pale, thin, his tiny body covered in bruises that appeared overnight because his bone marrow had stopped doing its job. She saw the way he smiled at her even when he felt terrible, the way he reached for her with hands that were too light, too fragile. I need your medical history, she said. Full genetic records. Your parents, grandparents, any hereditary conditions. Everything. Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted, just a fraction, but she heard it. The edge beneath the calm. Why? Not why do you need it, just why, as if he already knew the answer and was waiting for her to confirm it. Claire's hand tightened around the phone. Because our son is dying, and the doctors need it to save his life. The silence that followed was absolute. She could hear her own heartbeat, the rain, the hum of the fridge, and then, where are you? Not our son? Not, what are you talking about? Just immediate, cold focus. Claire's stomach dropped. Rafe, this isn't about us. I just need the records. You can send them or I can. Where are you? His voice hadn't risen. It didn't need to. There was a finality in it that made her skin prickle. The same tone he'd used once when a man at a restaurant had put his hand on her shoulder without permission. Quiet, absolute, dangerous. I'm in Seattle, she said, because lying felt pointless now. But I don't need you to come here. I just need... Text me the address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Rafe? The line went dead. Claire stared at her phone, heart hammering. She wanted to believe he wouldn't actually show up, that he'd send the records through a lawyer or a courier, keep his distance, let her handle this the way she'd been handling everything else for the past 18 months. Alone, broke, and one missed payment away from losing the roof over her head. But she knew better. Rafael Moretti didn't send couriers, he didn't delegate. And he sure as hell didn't let things go. She texted him the address. 17 minutes later, a black Mercedes sedan pulled up to the curb outside her building. Claire watched from the window, her stomach twisting as the driver's door opened and Rafe stepped out into the rain. He looked exactly the same, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to worry about whether people would get out of his way. His coat was charcoal wool, expensive enough that the rain beat it off it instead of soaking in. His dark hair was slightly longer than she remembered, brushed back from a face that could have sold magazines or broken hearts. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, and eyes so dark they looked black unless you were close enough to see the amber flecks near the center. Claire had been close enough once, close enough to memorize every detail. She buzzed him in before he could knock and wake Noah. When she opened the apartment door, Rafe was already at the top of the stairs, not even breathing hard. He stopped in the doorway, his gaze sweeping over her in one quick, assessing movement. Her unwashed hair pulled into a messy bun, the coffee stain on her sweater, the shadows under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide anymore. "Claire," he said quietly. She stepped back. "Come in." He did, and suddenly her apartment felt smaller, not because he was large, though he was, but because his presence filled the space in a way that made the peeling paint and secondhand furniture and flickering overhead light feel even more obvious. He didn't comment, just stood in her tiny living room, hands in his coat pockets, waiting. "You didn't have to come," Claire said, closing the door. "I could have... How old is he?" Straight to it. No pleasantries, no preamble. Claire's jaw tightened. 10 months. Rafe's expression didn't change, but she saw the calculation happen in real time. His eyes flicked to the hallway, then back to her. "And you didn't think I had a right to know?" "I didn't think you had a right to him." The words came out sharper than she intended, but she didn't take them back. "You lied to me, Rafe. For 3 months, you let me believe you were just some businessman, and then I found out what you really do. I never lied to you. You didn't tell me the truth. You didn't ask." Claire laughed, a bitter sound. "Right, because, hey, are you a crime boss? Is totally a normal third date question." Rafe's jaw tightened, the first crack in his control. "You want to do this now? Fine. You ran. You didn't give me a chance to explain, didn't give me anything except an empty apartment and a disconnected phone number. And now you call me because you need something." He took a step closer, his voice dropping. "So don't stand there and act like you're the only one who got hurt, Claire." She held his gaze, refusing to back down even though her heart was pounding. "I did what I had to do to protect my son. Our son." The correction was immediate, absolute. "And you didn't protect him. You hid him. There's a difference." Claire opened her mouth to argue, but a sound from the nursery cut her off, a soft whimper, followed by the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor speeding up slightly. She was moving before she thought about it, crossing to the hallway. Rafe followed. She wanted to tell him to stay in the living room, to wait, to give her space, but Noah was crying now, a thin, tired sound that made her chest ache, and she didn't have time to argue. The nursery was barely big enough for the crib, a changing table, and a rocking chair wedged into the corner. The walls were painted a soft blue she'd done herself, and there were glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that Noah was still too young to appreciate. The medical equipment, monitors, an oxygen tank on standby, a locked cabinet of medications, took up most of the remaining space. Claire crossed to the crib and lifted Noah carefully, mindful of the IV port in his tiny arm. He was so light. Too light. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and the bruises on his arms and legs stood out like watercolor stains. "Hey, baby," she murmured, settling into the rocking chair. "It's okay. Mama's here." Noah's crying quieted to soft hiccups as he curled against her chest, his small hand fisting in her sweater. Claire pressed her lips to his forehead, feeling the familiar mix of love and terror that had become her baseline over the past 3 months. She looked up and found Rafe standing in the doorway, absolutely frozen. His face had gone pale. His hands, which were never anything but steady, were clenched into fists at his sides. And his eyes, those dark, unreadable eyes, were locked on Noah with an expression Claire had never seen before. Raw, unguarded, devastated. "He has your eyes," she said quietly. Rafe didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at his son like the world had stopped turning. Claire shifted Noah slightly, adjusting his blanket. "His name is Noah. Noah James Weller. He was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia 3 months ago. The doctor started chemotherapy immediately, but his white blood cell count isn't responding the way it should. They need a full genetic workup from both parents to adjust the treatment plan and figure out if there are any hereditary factors complicating things." Rafe finally moved, stepping into the room. "What do they need?" "Everything. Medical records going back at least 2 generations. Any family history of cancer, blood disorders, autoimmune conditions, anything that might give them a clearer picture." "I'll have it by morning." "Rafe, I'll have it by morning," he repeated, his voice flat. Final. Then he looked at her, and the expression on his face made her throat tighten. "Why didn't you tell me?" Claire held Noah closer. "Because I was terrified. Not of you, of what you do, of the life you live. I didn't want that for him." "So you chose this instead?" Rafe gestured at the cramped room, the medical equipment, the bills stacked on the kitchen table visible through the open door. "You chose to do this alone?" "I chose to keep him safe." "He's not safe, Claire. He's dying." The words landed like a punch. Claire flinched, and Noah stirred in her arms, whimpering. She forced herself to breathe, to stay calm, to not break down in front of the man she'd spent 18 months trying to forget. "I'm doing everything I can," she said quietly. Rafe crouched down in front of the rocking chair, bringing himself to eye level with her. Up close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way his shoulders were rigid with tension. "I know you are," he said, and his voice was gentler now, almost kind. "But you don't have to do it alone anymore." Claire shook her head. I'm not asking for permission." He reached out slowly, carefully, and brushed the backs of his fingers against Noah's cheek. The baby stirred but didn't wake. Rafe's hand was shaking. "He's my son. That means he's my responsibility. My family. And I protect my family, Claire, no matter what." "Rafe, I don't want him growing up in your world." "He's already in it." Rafe's eyes met hers, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. "The second you called me, you put him in it. And if you think the people I deal with won't figure out that I have a son, you're wrong. They'll know by tomorrow, and they'll use that information however they can." Claire's blood went cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to let me help, not just with the medical records, with everything, security, protection, resources, whatever it takes to keep him alive and safe." "And what do you want in return?" Rafe's expression hardened. "I want to be his father." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and unavoidable. Claire looked down at Noah, who had fallen back asleep against her chest, his breathing soft and even. She thought about the past 18 months, the fear, the isolation, the endless nights wondering if she'd made the right choice. She thought about the stack of medical bills, the collection notices, the landlord who'd already warned her twice about late rent. And she thought about the man crouched in front of her, who had just learned he had a son and hadn't hesitated for even a second before deciding to protect him. "Okay," she said finally. "But we do this my way, slow, controlled, no decisions without talking to me first." Rafe stood, and for a moment she thought he might argue. Then he nodded. "Deal, bought." True to his word, Rafe had the medical records delivered by 7 a.m. the next morning, not by email or courier. He brought them himself, along with a leather-bound folder that had to be 3 inches thick. Claire was feeding Noah when he knocked. She answered the door in pajama pants and an oversized t-shirt, her hair still wet from the shower. "You're early," she said. "I didn't sleep." Rafe handed her the folder. Everything you need is in there. 3 generations of Moretti family medical history, compiled by my personal physician. If the oncologist needs clarification on anything, they can call this number. He handed her a second card. Dr. Andreas Kovac. He's one of the best hematologists in the country. I've already briefed him on Noah's case. Claire stared at the folder, then at him. How did you get all this so fast? I made some calls. Rafe, it's been less than 12 hours. I told you, he's my son. I don't waste time when it matters. She let him in, setting the folder on the kitchen table. Noah was in his high chair, mashing banana into his mouth with more enthusiasm than accuracy. When he saw Rafe, he stopped mid-bite and stared, wide-eyed. Rafe stared back. Can I? He gestured toward the high chair. Claire hesitated, then nodded. Rafe approached slowly, like Noah was a spooked animal that might bolt. He crouched down beside the high chair, his expensive suit completely at odds with the banana-smeared plastic tray. Hey, he said quietly. Noah blinked at him. Then, without warning, he grinned, a wide, gummy smile that showed exactly 2 teeth, and smacked his banana-covered hand on the tray. Rafe's expression cracked. Not much, just enough for Claire to see the emotion he was barely holding back. He likes you, she said. He doesn't know me. Not yet. Rafe reached out and Noah immediately grabbed his finger, holding on with surprising strength for such a small hand. They stayed like that for a long moment, father and son, connected by nothing more than a tiny fist and a terrible diagnosis. Claire turned away before the tears could fall. The oncologist reviewed the records that afternoon. Dr. Patel was a serious woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that Claire had come to appreciate over the past 3 months. She didn't sugarcoat. She didn't give false hope. She just gave facts. And right now, the facts were better than they'd been in weeks. This changes things, Dr. Patel said, tapping the folder. There's a genetic predisposition here. Your partner's grandfather had a similar condition that went into remission after a targeted treatment protocol. If we adjust Noah's chemotherapy to account for this, we might see better results. Claire gripped the edge of the desk. Might? Medicine isn't about certainties, Ms. Weller, but this gives us a much clearer picture. I'm cautiously optimistic. It was the most hope Claire had felt in months. She called Rafe the moment she left the office. It helped, she said when he answered. The records, they're adjusting his treatment. The doctor said it could make a real difference. Good. A pause. I want to meet with her, Dr. Patel. I want to understand the full picture. Claire bristled. Rafe, I don't think... I'm not trying to take over, Claire. I just need to know what we're dealing with, please. The please did it. She sighed. I'll set it up. Good. The meeting happened 2 days later. Dr. Patel walked them through Noah's diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment plan with the same brisk efficiency she always used. But Claire noticed the way she kept glancing at Rafe, the slight tension in her shoulders. She knew who he was. Of course she did. Everyone in Seattle knew the Moretti name, even if they didn't know the details. Rafe asked questions, smart ones, medical ones, the kind that made it clear he'd done his research. He wanted to know about side effects, success rates, alternative treatments. He wanted timelines and contingencies and backup plans. By the end of the hour, Dr. Patel looked almost impressed. You're very thorough, Mr. Moretti, she said. I'm invested, Rafe replied. As they left the hospital, Claire felt the weight of the past few days settling on her shoulders. She was exhausted, emotionally wrung out, and despite everything, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not alone. Thank you, she said as they reached the parking lot. Rafe looked at her. For what? For showing up, for caring, for all of it. His expression softened. He's my son, Claire. There's nowhere else I'd be. But that night, as Claire put Noah to bed and Rafe's car disappeared down the street, her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. You made a mistake calling him. Her blood went cold. A second message followed immediately. Now everyone knows. And some of us have been waiting for leverage like this. Claire's hand shook as she dialed Rafe's number. He answered on the first ring. What's wrong? I just got a text. Someone knows about Noah. Rafe, what did you do? Send me the screenshot. Now. She did. 10 seconds later, her phone rang again. Pack a bag, Rafe said, his voice deadly calm. You and Noah. You're not safe there anymore. What? No, I'm not just, Claire. He cut her off, and the authority in his voice made her freeze. Someone just threatened my son. That means they've been watching you, tracking you. And if they know enough to send that message, they know where you live. So you have two choices. You pack a bag and come with me, or I send a team to collect you. Either way, you're not spending another night in that apartment. Claire's heart was racing. This is insane. This is my world, and you brought Noah into it the second you called me. So now we deal with the consequences, together. She looked at the text again, at the threat that was vague enough to be deniable but specific enough to be terrifying, and she thought about Noah, asleep in his crib, too small and too sick to protect himself. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The line went dead. Claire stood in her quiet apartment, the rain still falling outside, and realized that everything had just changed. There was no going back now. Rafe arrived in 12 minutes with 2 SUVs, 4 men in dark suits, and an expression that could have cut glass. We need to move fast, he said, stepping into the apartment. Grab essentials only, clothes, medications, anything Noah needs. Leave everything else. Claire's hands were shaking as she pulled Noah's diaper bag from the closet. Rafe, who sent that message? I don't know yet, but I will. He was already moving through the apartment, checking windows, scanning the street below. One of his men, tall, built like a linebacker, with a scar across his left eyebrow, stood by the door, hand inside his jacket. Claire's stomach turned. That hand was resting on a gun. This was real. This was happening. She packed Noah's clothes, his medications, his favorite blanket. Her own things were an afterthought, jeans, sweaters, toiletries. She moved on autopilot, her mind struggling to catch up with the reality that she was leaving her home because someone had threatened her son. Claire. Rafe appeared in the bedroom doorway. We need to go. She zipped the bag. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting until we're behind secured walls. She wanted to argue, to demand details, explanations, a say in what happened next. But Noah was in the living room with one of Rafe's men standing guard, and the text message was still burned into her brain. So she followed Rafe down the stairs, into the rain, into the back of an SUV with windows so dark she couldn't see out. The door closed. The locks engaged with an ominous click. And as the car pulled away from her apartment, from her life, from everything she'd tried to build, Claire realized she'd just made a choice she couldn't undo. She'd called Rafael Moretti, and now, for better or worse, she belonged to his world. The drive took 40 minutes through rain-slicked streets that blurred into darkness beyond the tinted windows. Claire sat with Noah strapped into a car seat that had appeared from somewhere, already installed, already adjusted to the right height, as if Rafe had been planning for this moment since the second he'd learned his son existed. The baby had fallen asleep within minutes, lulled by the motion and the late hour, but Claire couldn't relax. Her hands were locked around the diaper bag in her lap, her eyes fixed on the back of the driver's head. Rafe sat beside her, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian to someone on the other end. His voice was low and controlled, but she caught enough words to understand the tone, urgent, commanding, absolute. When he ended the call, he made another immediately, then another. How many people are you calling? Claire asked. Enough. He didn't look at her, already dialing again. That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting right now. She bit back the retort forming on her tongue and looked at Noah instead, watching his chest rise and fall in the dim glow of the passing streetlights. He looked so peaceful, so unaware that his entire world had just shifted on its axis. The SUV finally turned off the main road onto a private drive marked only by a subtle iron gate that opened automatically as they approached. The property beyond was massive, rolling grounds disappearing into darkness, tall trees lining the driveway, and at the end of it all, a house that looked more like an estate. 3 stories of stone and glass, lit from within by warm light that spilled onto the manicured lawn. Claire's breath caught. You live here? When I'm not at the downtown penthouse. Rafe pocketed his phone as the car pulled up to the front entrance. This is more secure. Gated property, 24-hour surveillance, and enough distance from the city that no one gets close without us knowing about it. The door opened before Claire could respond. A woman stood in the entrance, late 50s, silver hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing slacks and a cardigan that somehow managed to look both elegant and practical. Her expression was warm but assessing as her eyes moved from Rafe to Claire to the sleeping baby in the car seat. Ms. Elena, Rafe said, stepping out and offering his hand to Claire. This is Claire Weller and my son Noah. They'll be staying in the East Wing. Make sure everything is prepared. Already done, Mr. Moretti. Elena's voice carried a faint Eastern European accent, Polish, maybe, or Czech. The nursery is ready, and I've prepared the adjoining suite. Will you be needing anything else tonight? Security briefing in 20 minutes. Conference room. Of course. Claire climbed out of the SUV carefully, trying not to jostle Noah. The night air was cold and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. One of Rafe's men retrieved their bags from the trunk while another stood by the entrance, scanning the darkness with the kind of vigilance that made Claire's skin prickle. These weren't employees, they were soldiers. Elena approached with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the tension crackling through everyone else. Let me show you to your rooms, dear. The little one looks exhausted. Claire followed her into the house, acutely aware of Rafe's presence behind her. The interior was exactly what she'd expected, expensive without being ostentatious, all dark wood and cream-colored walls and art that probably cost more than her entire apartment. But there was warmth to it too, a sense that people actually lived here rather than just occupied the space. They climbed a wide staircase to the second floor, then down a hallway lined with closed doors. Elena opened the last one on the left, revealing a suite that made Claire's breath catch for the second time that night. The nursery was beautiful. Soft gray walls, white furniture that looked handcrafted, and a crib that was probably worth more than Claire made in a month. There was a rocking chair by the window, shelves already stocked with books and toys, and in the corner, her heart clenched, all of Noah's medical equipment, set up and ready to go. How? She turned to find Rafe standing in the doorway. How did you do this so fast? I made calls while you were packing. He stepped into the room, his gaze moving over the space with the same assessing look Elena had given them earlier. Dr. Kovac sent over the equipment specifications. Elena handled the rest. In 12 minutes. I'm efficient when I need to be. Claire wanted to be angry about the presumption, the way he'd just assumed she'd come here, the way he'd prepared a room for her son without asking. But she was too tired, too scared, and too grateful for the crib that looked sturdy and safe and infinitely better than the second-hand one she'd been using. She laid Noah down carefully, tucking his blanket around him. He stirred but didn't wake, his tiny fist curling against his cheek. The monitor on the nightstand beeped its familiar rhythm, steady, strong, alive. The adjoining room is yours, Elena said quietly from the doorway. There's a bathroom between the two, and I've stocked the closet with some essentials. If you need anything else, there's an intercom by the bed. Just press the button and someone will respond immediately. Thank you, Claire managed. Elena smiled, the kind of smile that made Claire think she'd seen a lot in her years working for Rafe and wasn't easily surprised by anything. Get some rest, dear. Tomorrow will be complicated enough without exhaustion making it worse. She left, closing the door with a soft click. Claire stood by the crib, watching Noah sleep, until Rafe's voice broke the silence. We need to talk. She turned. He was leaning against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, looking more tired than she'd ever seen him. The controlled mask had slipped just enough for her to see the strain underneath. Not tonight, Claire said. I can't. It has to be tonight. He straightened. Because tomorrow, things are going to move fast, and you need to understand what's happening before they do. Claire's jaw tightened, but she followed him out of the nursery and into the suite next door. It was just as elegant as the rest of the house. King-size bed with crisp white linens, sitting area by the window, fireplace that looked original to the house. Her bags had already been placed on the bench at the foot of the bed. Rafe closed the door and crossed to the window, staring out at the dark grounds. The text you received came from a burner phone. Untraceable. But the language, the timing, the way it was phrased, It's consistent with Dmitry Volkov's operation. Claire's stomach dropped. Who? Russian Bratva. East Coast operation trying to expand into Seattle. We've been discouraging their efforts for the past year. He turned to face her. Volkov is smart, ruthless, and patient. He doesn't make moves unless he's sure they'll pay off. And a man's son, especially my son, is exactly the kind of leverage he'd use. How would he even know about Noah? Because I made calls to get those medical records. Because I've been to your apartment 3 times in 2 days. Because my people have been watching you since the moment you called me. Rafe's expression was grim. I told you, the second you brought me into Noah's life, you put him in my world. And in my world, information is currency. Volkov's been watching me for months, waiting for an opening. You just gave him one. Claire felt like she'd been punched. So this is my fault? No. Rafe crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands coming up to grip her shoulders. This is Volkov's fault for being a predatory bastard, and it's my fault for not anticipating it fast enough. But it's not yours, Claire. You did what you had to do to save our son. And now he's in danger because of it. He's in danger because men like Volkov exist, but he's also protected now because I exist too. His grip tightened slightly. I won't let anything happen to him, or to you. Do you understand me? She wanted to believe him, looking into his eyes, dark and intense, and absolutely certain. She almost did. What happens next? She asked. Next, I find out how much Volkov knows and shut down his sources. Then I make it very clear that touching my family is a death sentence. He released her shoulders but didn't step back. But that means you stay here. You don't leave the property without a security detail. You don't make calls on your personal phone. You don't contact anyone from your old life until I say it's safe. Claire's chest tightened. Rafe, I have a job. I have a life. You have a son who's in remission treatment and a target on your back. Everything else is secondary. You can't just lock me up here. I can, and I will, if it keeps you alive. His voice was flat, unyielding. I'm not negotiating on this, Claire. Not when it comes to Noah's safety. She stepped back, anger flaring hot and bright. I didn't agree to this. I didn't agree to give up my entire life, to become some kind of prisoner. You're not a prisoner. You're protected. What's the difference? A prisoner wants to leave. You're smarter than that. The words stung because they were true. Claire looked away, blinking back frustrated tears. She hated this. Hated feeling helpless. Hated that he was right. Hated that the only way to keep Noah safe was to surrender control to a man who lived in a world she'd spent 18 months trying to escape. I need air, she said. Claire, just give me a minute. Please. She walked out before he could stop her, moving blindly down the hallway and back down the stairs. The house was quiet. The only sound the distant murmur of voices from somewhere deeper inside. Rafe's men, probably, doing whatever it was armed security did at midnight in a crime boss's mansion. Claire found herself in a large room that looked like a library, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, a fireplace with embers still glowing faintly. She sank into one of the chairs and pressed her hands to her face. This was insane. All of it. 2 days ago, her biggest problem had been figuring out how to pay for Noah's next round of treatment. Now she was hiding in a mansion with armed guards outside because a Russian mobster might use her son as leverage in some kind of criminal turf war. You're handling this better than most would. Claire jerked her head up. Elena stood in the doorway, holding a tray with a teapot and 2 cups. I brought chamomile, the older woman said, crossing to set the tray on the table beside Claire's chair. It won't fix anything, but it might help you sleep. I don't think I can sleep. Then at least drink something warm. Elena poured a cup and handed it to her, then settled into the chair across from Claire, with her own cup cradled in both hands. You're afraid. It wasn't a question. Claire nodded anyway. Good, Elena said. Fear means you're paying attention. It's the people who aren't afraid in situations like this that worry me. How long have you worked for Rafe? 15 years, since he was barely more than a boy trying to hold together an empire his father built and his uncle nearly destroyed. Elena took a sip of tea. He was 23 when I met him, Angry, reckless, determined to prove himself. I thought he'd be dead within a year. What changed? He learned that power without control is just chaos, and that the people you protect are worth more than the territory you control. Elena's eyes softened. He's a hard man, Claire. He has to be in this life. But he's not a cruel one, and he doesn't make promises he can't keep. Claire wrapped her hands around the warm cup. He promised to protect Noah. Then Noah is protected. Raphael doesn't have many lines he won't cross, but family is one of them, always has been. Elena paused. He told me about the boy's condition. I'm sorry. No parent should have to watch their child fight that kind of battle. I just want him to have a normal life. School, friends, birthday parties. Not this, Claire gestured at the opulent room. Not armed guards and threats and hiding. Normal is relative, dear, and sometimes the safe choice and the normal choice aren't the same thing. Elena set down her cup. Raphael can give your son protection, medical care, a future where he doesn't have to worry about whether his mother can afford his next treatment. That's not nothing. It's also not freedom. No, Elena agreed. But freedom without safety is just a prettier word for vulnerability. And in this world, Raphael's world, vulnerable people don't last long. The words settled over Claire like a heavy blanket. She wanted to argue, to insist that she could keep Noah safe on her own, that they didn't need Rafe's money or his protection or his dangerous, complicated life. But the text message on her phone said otherwise. I should check on Noah, Claire said finally, setting down the tea. Elena nodded. Rest if you can. Tomorrow Raphael will want to discuss security protocols and long-term arrangements. It will be easier if you're not running on fumes. Claire climbed the stairs slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last. When she reached the nursery, she found Rafe standing by the crib, looking down at Noah with an expression that made her chest ache. He didn't look like a crime boss in that moment. He looked like a father seeing his son for only the second time, trying to memorize every detail before the world intruded again. He's beautiful, Rafe said quietly, not looking up. Claire crossed to stand beside him. He has your stubborn chin. And your nose. A faint smile touched Rafe's mouth. Poor kid. Despite everything, Claire almost laughed. My nose is fine. It's perfect. He finally looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. I meant what I said earlier. I won't let anything happen to either of you. I know. And she did. She could see it in the set of his shoulders, the determination in his eyes, the way his hand rested on the crib rail like he was physically anchoring himself to this moment. But Rafe, I need you to understand something too. I'm Noah's mother. I've been making decisions for him since the day he was born. I'm not going to just hand that over because you showed up with security teams and medical records. I'm not asking you to. Aren't you? Because it feels like you're taking control of everything, where we live, who we see, what happens next. And I get that you're trying to protect us, but I need to be part of the decisions, not just someone you give orders to. Rafe was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You're right. I'm used to operating alone, making calls and expecting people to follow them. But this isn't a business deal or a territory dispute. This is our son. He turned to face her fully. So here's what I'm proposing. Tomorrow, we sit down, just us, and we figure out what this looks like. Security, medical care, living arrangements, all of it. We make decisions together. But Claire, you have to meet me halfway. That means accepting that some things aren't negotiable. Noah's safety is one of them. I can agree to that, Claire said, as long as you agree that I'm not just going to disappear into your world and pretend mine never existed. I have a career, friends, a life that matters to me. Then we'll figure out how to protect that too. It wasn't everything she wanted, but it was more than she'd expected. Claire held out her hand. Partners? Rafe looked at her outstretched hand, then took it, his grip warm and firm. Partners. They stood there in the dim glow of the nursery nightlight, hands clasped, watching their son sleep. And for just a moment, Claire let herself believe that maybe, they could actually make this work. Then Rafe's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, read the message, and his entire expression went cold. What is it? Claire asked. Volkov just made contact. He wants a meeting. Rafe's jaw clenched. And he specifically mentioned Noah by name. Claire's blood turned to ice. What does he want? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. He pocketed the phone and headed for the door. Wait, you're leaving? Now? I have to. The longer I wait, the more time he has to move his pieces into place. Rafe paused in the doorway. Marcus will be outside your door all night. 2 more men on the grounds. You're safe here, Claire. I promise. And what about you? Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, that she was asking. I'll be fine. This isn't my first negotiation with a hostile party. Rafe, get some sleep. I'll be back before morning. He was gone before she could argue, his footsteps fading down the hallway. Claire stood frozen in the nursery, listening to the sound of car engines starting outside, of men mobilizing for whatever came next. She crossed to the window and watched as 2 SUVs pulled away from the house, disappearing into the darkness beyond the gates. And she realized, with a sick certainty that settled in her bones, that everything Elena had said was true. This was Rafe's world now, and whether she liked it or not, it was hers too. Claire checked on Noah one more time, still sleeping, still breathing steady, then retreated to her own room. She tried to sleep, tried to quiet the racing thoughts and the fear that kept whispering what if in the back of her mind. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw that text message. You made a mistake calling him. She must have dozed eventually, because she woke to pale dawn light filtering through the curtains and the sound of voices downstairs. Claire checked her phone, 6:47 a.m., then padded to the nursery. Noah was awake, playing quietly with his fingers, making the soft cooing sounds that meant he was content. Relief flooded through her. She lifted him from the crib, changed his diaper, and carried him downstairs following the smell of coffee. The kitchen was enormous, all marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. Elena was at the stove, making what looked like enough breakfast to feed an army. She looked up when Claire entered and smiled. Good morning, dear. Did you sleep? A little. Claire settled Noah into a high chair that had appeared overnight, another piece of evidence that Rafe had been planning for this. Is Rafe back? An hour ago. He's in the office with Marcus. Elena set a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of Claire, then produced a bottle for Noah. He said to let you rest. Claire picked at the eggs, her stomach too tight to manage more than a few bites. What happened at the meeting? That's not my place to say, dear, but he'll tell you when he's ready. Which meant it hadn't gone well. Claire was feeding Noah when Rafe appeared in the doorway, looking exactly like a man who hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loose, and there was a shadow of stubble along his jaw. But his eyes were sharp, alert, missing nothing. We need to talk, he said. Elena took that as her cue to disappear. Rafe crossed to the counter, poured himself a cup of coffee, and drained half of it before turning to face Claire. Volkov knows everything, he said flatly. Noah's diagnosis, his treatment schedule, which hospital, which doctor. He knows about your apartment, your job, the coffee shop you go to every morning. He's been watching you for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. Claire's hands went numb. How? He had someone on the inside. I don't know who yet, but I'm working on it. Rafe set down the cup. He wants a trade, territory on the eastern docks in exchange for leaving you and Noah alone. And are you going to give it to him? No. The answer was immediate, absolute. Claire's heart hammered. Rafe, if it keeps Noah safe, it won't. He crossed to her, crouching down so they were eye level. Men like Volkov don't honor deals, Claire. The second I give him that territory, he'll know I can be leveraged through my family. And then he'll never stop. There'll always be another demand, another threat, another reason to push. His voice dropped. The only way to keep Noah safe is to eliminate the threat entirely. Claire's throat went dry. What does that mean? It means I'm going to war, and it means you and Noah stay here, behind walls I control, until it's over. How long will that take? As long as it needs to. She looked at Noah happily gumming his bottle, completely unaware that his existence had just sparked a conflict that would probably end in blood. I hate this. I know. Rafe's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. But I'm good at this, Claire. This is what I do. And I've never failed to protect something I care about. I'm scared. Good. That means you'll be careful. He stood, the moment of softness vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Elena will go over the security protocols with you this morning. Marcus and 2 others will stay on the property at all times. You don't go anywhere without an escort. Understand? Claire nodded, not trusting her voice. Rafe leaned down and pressed a kiss to Noah's head. Gentle, reverent, heartbreaking. Then he was gone, leaving Claire alone in the massive kitchen with her son and the terrible understanding that the life she'd known was gone. And the war to protect the new one had already begun. The days that followed fell into a strange rhythm that felt nothing like the life Claire had known. She woke each morning to the sound of Noah stirring in the nursery, fed him breakfast in a kitchen larger than her entire apartment had been, and spent her afternoons reading to him in the library or walking the grounds with Marcus trailing 10 feet behind like a well-dressed shadow. Elena moved through the house with quiet efficiency, appearing whenever Claire needed something before she'd even thought to ask. And Rafe came and went at irregular hours, sometimes gone for days, sometimes appearing at midnight to stand silently in Noah's doorway before disappearing again into whatever darkness his war with Volkov required. Claire tried to establish boundaries, tried to maintain some sense of autonomy in a world that seemed designed to strip it away. But every time she pushed back, suggesting she take Noah to his chemotherapy appointments alone, or asking if she could call her law firm to explain her sudden absence, Rafe's response was the same calm, immovable refusal. Too dangerous. Not yet. Soon. Soon became a week. Then 2. Noah's treatment continued under Dr. Patel's supervision, but now the appointments happened at the estate. Rafe had converted one of the ground floor rooms into a fully equipped medical suite, complete with monitoring equipment and a pharmacy that would have made a small hospital jealous. Dr. Patel came 3 times a week, accompanied by a nurse and always by 2 of Rafe's security team who swept the vehicles before they were allowed through the gates. "This is excessive," Claire said one afternoon, watching through the window as Marcus checked the undercarriage of Dr. Patel's sedan with what looked like a mirror on a pole. "It's necessary," Elena replied, not looking up from the soup she was preparing. The older woman had become Claire's unlikely anchor in this strange new life, offering companionship without judgment and answers without condescension. 3 days ago, someone tried to plant a tracking device on the doctor's car. Marcus found it during a routine sweep. Claire's stomach dropped. "Did Rafe tell you that?" "Marcus did. Mr. Moretti doesn't like to worry you with operational details." "Operational details," Claire repeated, the words tasting bitter. "Is that what we're calling attempted murder now?" Elena's hand stilled on the cutting board. She set down her knife and turned to face Claire fully, her expression gentle but firm. "You're angry." "I'm a lot of things." "Anger is the easiest one to feel. It's cleaner than fear, more empowering than helplessness." Elena crossed her arms. "But it's also clouding your judgment, dear. Raphael isn't keeping things from you to control you. He's doing it to protect you from carrying burdens you don't need to carry." "I'm not a child, Elena. I can handle the truth." "Can you?" The question was asked kindly, but it still stung. "Because the truth is that Dmitry Volkov has put a price on your son's head. The truth is that 3 of Raphael's men have been injured in the past 10 days trying to keep Volkov's people away from this property. The truth is that your son is alive right now because Raphael has made choices you would probably find horrifying." Elena's eyes softened. "So yes, he's keeping things from you, but not because he thinks you're weak, because he's trying to let you be Noah's mother instead of a soldier in a war you never asked to fight." Claire looked away, blinking hard against the sudden burn of tears. "I just want my life back." "I know. But that life ended the moment you called him, and mourning it won't change what comes next." Before Claire could respond, the intercom on the wall crackled to life. "Ms. Weller, Dr. Patel is ready for Noah." Marcus's voice was professionally neutral, as always. Claire wiped her eyes and went to collect her son. The appointment went smoothly. Noah's blood counts were improving, slowly but consistently, and Dr. Patel seemed cautiously optimistic about the adjusted treatment protocol. But as she was packing up her equipment, she paused and looked at Claire with an expression that was hard to read. "Ms. Weller, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Claire's guard went up immediately. "Of course." "Are you here by choice?" The question hung in the air between them. Claire was acutely aware of Marcus standing just outside the door, of the cameras she'd noticed in the corners of every room, of Elena somewhere in the house listening to everything through whatever network Rafe had established. "Yes," she said finally. "I am." Dr. Patel studied her for a long moment. "If that ever changes, you have my number, day or night." She left before Claire could formulate a response. The words echoed in Claire's mind for the rest of the afternoon, needling at her, forcing her to examine the questions she'd been avoiding. Was she here by choice? Or had choice become such a relative concept that she'd stopped being able to recognize when it had been taken away? That night, Rafe came home. Claire heard the cars first, multiple engines, the crunch of gravel, the low murmur of voices conferring in the darkness outside. She'd been reading in the library, unable to sleep despite the late hour, and she moved to the window in time to see Rafe emerge from the lead SUV. Even from a distance, she could tell something was wrong. He moved stiffly, favoring his left side, and when Marcus approached him, Rafe waved him off with visible irritation. Claire was out of the library and down the stairs before she'd made a conscious decision to move. She found him in the kitchen, Elena already there with a first aid kit open on the counter. Rafe had his shirt off, revealing a livid bruise spreading across his ribs and a gash along his shoulder that was still bleeding sluggishly. "It's nothing," he was saying as Elena pressed gauze to the wound. "Ricochet. Barely grazed me." "Barely grazed you," Elena repeated dryly. "That's why you're bleeding all over my clean floor." "I'll have it cleaned." Rafe looked up and saw Claire in the doorway. His expression shifted, some of the hard edges smoothing out. "You should be asleep." "You're bleeding." Claire crossed to him, her earlier anger evaporating in the face of the raw evidence of violence. "What happened?" "A disagreement." "Rafe," he sighed, wincing as Elena applied antiseptic. "Volkov tried to move on one of my warehouses. We were waiting for him. Things got loud." Claire's hands clenched into fists. "How loud?" "Loud enough that I'm going to need a new warehouse." He tried for a smile and failed. "But Volkov lost twice as many men as I did, and he didn't get what he came for. That's a win in my book." "You call this a win?" Claire gestured at the bruise, the cut, the exhaustion written in every line of his body. "You're hurt, Rafe. Your men are hurt. When does this end?" "When Volkov is dead or driven back to the East Coast. Whichever comes first." He caught her hand before she could turn away. "Claire, I know this isn't what you wanted, but it's what we have, and I'm handling it." "By getting shot at?" "By making sure that the next time Volkov thinks about coming after my family, he remembers what it cost him to try." His grip tightened. "I told you I'd protect you. This is what that looks like." Elena finished bandaging the shoulder and stepped back, her expression carefully neutral. "I'll leave you two to talk. Try not to bleed on anything else, Mr. Moretti." She disappeared into the hallway, leaving Claire and Rafe alone in the kitchen. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. "I spoke to Dr. Patel today," Claire said finally. "She asked me if I was here by choice." Rafe's jaw tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I told her yes, but I'm not sure that's true anymore." Claire pulled her hand free and wrapped her arms around herself. "I'm grateful for what you're doing, for the medical care, the security, all of it. But I feel like I'm disappearing, Rafe. Like I'm becoming just another thing you protect instead of a person who gets to make decisions about her own life. That's not what I want." "Maybe not, but it's what's happening." She met his eyes. "I need something to do, something that's mine. I can't just be Noah's mother and you're whatever I am to you. I need to be Claire too." Rafe was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay, what do you need?" The question surprised her. She'd expected resistance, arguments, reasons why whatever she wanted was too dangerous or complicated or impossible. "I need to work. Maybe not at my old firm. I know that's not safe right now, but something. Legal research, consulting, anything that lets me use my brain for more than reading children's books and worrying." "I can arrange that." He straightened carefully, wincing again. "I have lawyers on retainer who handle the legitimate side of my business. They're always buried in contract work and property disputes. If you're willing to sign an NDA and work remotely, I can have files sent over by tomorrow. Claire blinked. Just like that? Just like that. A faint smile touched his mouth. I told you, Claire. I'm not trying to cage you. I'm trying to keep you alive. If working makes that easier, then you'll work. She didn't know what to say to that. Part of her wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the resentment that had been building for 2 weeks. But looking at him now, bruised, bleeding, exhausted from a battle he was fighting to protect her and Noah, the anger felt petty and small. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. My lawyers are ruthless and they'll expect the same quality of work they'd get from anyone else. No special treatment just because you're... He paused, seeming to reconsider his words. Just because of our situation. Good. I don't want special treatment. I want to be useful. Rafe's expression softened. You're already useful, Claire. You're keeping our son happy and healthy. That's more valuable than any contract review. Maybe, but it's not enough for me. She took a breath. I need you to understand that. I love Noah more than anything, but if I lose myself completely in being his mother, I won't be any good to him, or to you, or to myself. I understand. And looking at him, Claire thought maybe he actually did. I'll make the arrangements tonight. You'll have files by morning. He started to move past her toward the stairs, but Claire caught his arm. Rafe, wait. Let me help with that. She gestured at his shoulder. Elena did good work, but you should probably have it checked properly. It's fine. Please. Let me do something that actually matters. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. They went upstairs together, moving quietly past Noah's room, where the monitor showed him sleeping peacefully. Rafe's bedroom was at the opposite end of the hall from Claire's suite, larger, more masculine, with dark wood furniture and windows that overlooked the grounds. He sat on the edge of the bed and let Claire examine the bandage Elena had applied. It's not as bad as I thought, she said, gently probing the edges, but you should still have Dr. Kovacs look at it. I will. Tomorrow. His voice was tired, the adrenaline from whatever had happened at the warehouse finally wearing off. Claire, I need you to know something. She looked up from the bandage. What? This war with Volkov, it's escalating faster than I anticipated. He's desperate, which makes him dangerous, and desperate men do desperate things. Rafe's eyes were serious, intense. I need you to promise me that if something happens, if there's an emergency and I'm not here, you'll do exactly what Marcus tells you. No questions, no arguments. Just trust him. Claire's chest tightened. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. But you should also know that I have contingencies in place. Safe houses, extraction protocols, resources that will keep you and Noah protected even if... He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. Even if I'm not around to do it myself. Don't talk like that. I have to. He caught her hand, his grip warm and solid. Because I need you to be prepared for every possibility, even the ones we don't want to think about. Claire wanted to argue, to tell him he was being paranoid, that he'd be fine, that this would all be over soon and they could figure out what came next. But she'd seen the blood on his shirt, the bruise on his ribs, the exhaustion in his eyes. She knew what he was really saying, that men in his position didn't always get happy endings. I promise, she said quietly. If something happens, I'll listen to Marcus. Thank you. He released her hand and lay back on the bed, his eyes already closing. You should get some sleep too. I will. But she didn't move. She stood there watching him, this dangerous, complicated man who'd turned her life upside down and somehow become essential to it in the span of 2 weeks. Rafe? Be careful, please. His eyes opened, and for just a moment she saw something vulnerable in them, something that looked almost like fear. I will, for you and Noah. I'll be as careful as I can be. It wasn't a promise. It was the best he could offer, and Claire had to accept that it would have to be enough. She went back to her own room, checked on Noah one more time, and finally crawled into bed. But sleep was a long time coming, and when it did, her dreams were full of gunfire and blood, and a text message that kept repeating, "You made a mistake calling him." The next morning, true to his word, Rafe had a stack of legal files delivered to Claire's suite. They were complex, detailed contract disputes and property acquisitions that required real analysis and attention. Claire threw herself into the work with something close to relief, grateful to have something to focus on besides the armed men patrolling the grounds, and the war being waged somewhere beyond the estate's walls. Days blurred together. Noah continued to improve, his energy levels rising as the adjusted treatment protocol worked its slow magic. Claire worked through case files and drafted memos, trading emails with Rafe's legal team and slowly rebuilding the professional identity she'd felt slipping away. And Rafe continued his war with Volkov, coming home at irregular hours looking progressively more exhausted, but refusing to discuss details beyond vague assurances that things were progressing. Then, 3 weeks after Claire had first arrived at the estate, everything changed. She was in the library with Noah, helping him stack blocks into an increasingly precarious tower, when Marcus appeared in the doorway with an expression she'd never seen before, openly concerned. "Miss Weller, I need you to come with me. Bring Noah." Claire's heart jumped into her throat. "What's wrong?" "Possible security breach. We're moving you to the safe room as a precaution." His hand was already on his radio, speaking in low, clipped tones to someone on the other end. "Now, please." Claire scooped Noah into her arms, not bothering with toys or supplies. Marcus led them through the house at a pace just short of running, Elena falling into step beside them with a bag already packed, formula, diapers, medications. She'd clearly been preparing for exactly this scenario. The safe room was hidden behind a panel in Rafe's study. Marcus pressed his palm to a biometric scanner, and the wall swung inward, revealing a space roughly the size of Claire's old bedroom. It was furnished with a couch, a crib that looked identical to the one in Noah's nursery, supplies stacked neatly on shelves along one wall, and monitors showing views of the grounds from multiple angles. "Get inside," Marcus said. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except Mr. Moretti or myself. You know the code." "Marcus, what's happening?" "Volkov's people breached the outer perimeter. We've got them contained, but until we're sure there aren't more coming, you stay here." He was already moving back toward the door. "Elena will stay with you. You'll be safe." The panel swung shut with a heavy, final sound. Claire heard the locks engage, multiple deadbolts sliding home with precise mechanical clicks. Then silence. Elena set the bag on the couch and immediately began preparing a bottle for Noah, her movements calm and practiced. "Come, dear, let's get the little one settled before he realizes something is wrong." Claire's hands were shaking as she lowered Noah into the crib. He looked up at her with wide, curious eyes, not understanding the fear coursing through her veins. She forced a smile. "It's okay, baby. We're just playing a different game today." She turned to the monitors, her stomach churning as she watched armed figures moving across the grounds. Rafe's men, she assumed, or hoped. It was hard to tell from the aerial angles. Flashes of movement near the gate. Someone running. The crack of gunfire that she could hear even through the reinforced walls. "They won't get in," Elena said quietly, appearing beside her with the bottle. "This room is built to withstand almost anything, and Raphael's men are the best." "Where is he?" Claire's voice cracked. "Where's Rafe?" Elena's expression tightened. "He left 2 hours ago, meeting with a contact who claimed to have information about Volkov's next move." She paused. "Marcus has been trying to reach him since the breach was detected. No response yet." The fear that had been simmering in Claire's chest exploded into full panic. What if this was a trap? What if they lured him away so they could... "Then he'll handle it." Elena's voice was firm. "Raphael Moretti has survived worse than Dmitry Volkov. He'll come back, Claire. He always does." But the minutes ticked by with no word. Noah fussed, sensing the tension, and Claire held him close, murmuring reassurances she didn't feel. On the monitors, the movement outside intensified. More figures, more gunfire, and then an explosion. The sound was muffled by the safe room's walls, but still loud enough to make Claire jump. On the monitors, smoke billowed from somewhere near the east wing. Elena's face went pale. "That's the kitchen," she whispered. Claire's mind raced. If the kitchen was compromised, if Volkov's people were inside the house, how long before they found the safe room? How long before... The intercom crackled to life. A voice she didn't recognize. "We know you're in there, Ms. Weller, and we know about the boy." Claire's blood turned to ice. "Mr. Volkov wants to speak with you." the voice continued, calm and polite and utterly terrifying. If you come out now, we'll make this simple. If you make us come in, well, it won't be pleasant for anyone, especially not for the child. Elena grabbed Claire's arm, her grip bruising. Don't respond. Don't give them anything. But they said, they're lying. They don't know how to breach this room. They're trying to scare you into opening it yourself. Elena pulled her away from the intercom. Raphael designed this space. It's impenetrable. We just have to wait. But wait for what? For Rafe to come home and find his house under siege? For Volkov's men to give up and leave? For some miracle that felt increasingly unlikely with every passing second? Claire looked at Noah peacefully finishing his bottle, oblivious to the horror unfolding around him, and she made a decision. Elena, if they get in, if something happens to me, you take Noah and you run. There's an emergency exit, right? Some way out of here that doesn't go back through the house? Elena's eyes widened. Claire, no, you can't. Promise me. Claire's voice was steel. Whatever happens, Noah survives. That's all that matters. Before Elena could respond, the monitors flickered, then went black. Every screen simultaneously just died. The safe room plunged into emergency lighting, red and ominous. And then, from somewhere beyond the reinforced door came a new sound, the steady, rhythmic pounding of something heavy against metal. They were trying to break in. Elena moved to the far wall, pressing her hand against what looked like solid stone. A panel slid aside, revealing a narrow passage. Emergency tunnel. Leads to the garage. If they breach the main door, we go through here. Claire gathered Noah close, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. The pounding continued, steady, relentless, and beneath it, she could hear voices, men conferring, planning, coordinating. Then her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket with shaking hands. A text from an unknown number. One word, run. Before she could process it, the pounding stopped. Silence rushed in to fill the void. Elena grabbed her arm. Now! We move now! They were halfway to the tunnel when Claire heard it, the distinctive beep of the safe room's biometric lock being overridden. Someone had the code. Elena shoved Claire toward the tunnel. Go, I'll buy you time. Elena, no! Go! Claire ran. She plunged into the tunnel with Noah clutched against her chest, the emergency lighting barely enough to see by. Behind her, she heard the safe room door opening. Voices. Elena's sharp, defiant tone answering them. Then a gunshot. Claire choked back a scream and kept running, her feet pounding on concrete, Noah starting to cry against her shoulder. The tunnel seemed endless, stretching on and on into darkness. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she didn't stop. The tunnel ended in a ladder leading up to a hatch. Claire climbed one-handed, Noah tucked against her with desperate strength and shoved the hatch open. She emerged into chaos. The garage was full of smoke and the acrid smell of burning metal. Two of Rafe's SUVs were on fire. Bodies lay on the concrete. Rafe's men, she thought, but she didn't let herself look close enough to be sure. And standing between her and the only vehicle that wasn't actively burning was a man she'd never seen before. Tall, pale, with ice-blue eyes and a smile that made her skin crawl. Ms. Weller, he said in accented English, how nice of you to join us. Mr. Volkov will be so pleased. Claire backed toward the ladder, but another man appeared from the smoke, cutting off her escape. She was trapped. The pale man gestured to Noah. The boy looks healthy. Shame about the cancer, but I suppose that's why you're so valuable to Mr. Moretti, yes? He'd do anything to save his son, including perhaps giving us what we want. Stay away from us, Claire said, her voice stronger than she felt. Or what? The man stepped closer. You'll fight? With a sick infant in your arms? I don't think so. He reached for Noah. Claire turned, shielding her son with her body, preparing for violence she had no idea how to counter. And then, gunfire. Close and deafening. The pale man dropped, blood blooming across his chest. The second man dove for cover, and from the smoke stepped Marcus, his face grim and determined, gun raised. Get in the car, he barked at Claire. Now! She didn't argue. She ran to the least damaged SUV, yanked open the back door, and dove inside with Noah. Marcus was behind the wheel before she'd even gotten her seatbelt fastened, the engine roaring to life. They crashed through the burning garage door and out onto the grounds. More gunfire. The windshield cracked but held. Marcus drove like a man possessed, weaving between obstacles Claire couldn't even see through the smoke and darkness. And then they were through the gates, onto the private road, speeding away from the estate that had been their sanctuary and had become a war zone. Claire held Noah tight, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and terror and the awful certainty that nothing would ever be the same. "Where's Rafe?" she managed to gasp. Marcus's jaw was tight, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I don't know, Ms. Weller. I don't know." The safe house was a nondescript cabin 2 hours north of Seattle, buried deep enough in the woods that cell service was non-existent, and the only road in was barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. Marcus had driven in complete silence, checking the mirrors obsessively, taking turns that seemed random until Claire realized he was running a counter-surveillance route. By the time they pulled up to the darkened structure, Noah had cried himself into exhausted sleep, and Claire's hands had gone numb from gripping the door handle. Marcus killed the engine but didn't move. He sat there, breathing hard, staring at the cabin like he was trying to convince himself it was real. Blood streaked his left sleeve, his own or someone else's, Claire couldn't tell. "Is it safe here?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Safer than anywhere else right now." He finally looked at her, and the expression on his face made her stomach clench. "Ms. Weller, I need you to understand something. What just happened? The breach? The assault? The fact that they had the safe room codes? That wasn't just an attack. That was a coordinated hit using inside information. Someone close to Mr. Moretti gave them everything they needed." Claire's throat went dry. "Who?" "I don't know yet, but until I do, we trust no one. Not the other security team, not the household staff, no one except the people in this car right now." He opened his door. "Come on. We need to get inside and secure the perimeter before I try to make contact." The cabin was small but well stocked. Canned food, bottled water, medical supplies, and in a locked cabinet that Marcus opened with a key from his jacket, enough weapons to outfit a small militia. He did a quick sweep of the 3 rooms while Claire settled Noah on the couch, wrapping him in a blanket she found in a closet that smelled like cedar and disuse. "All clear," Marcus said, returning to the main room. He pulled out his phone, frowned at the no-service indicator, and moved to a landline mounted on the wall. "This line is secure, runs through 3 different relays before it reaches the outside world. I'm going to try to reach Mr. Moretti. And if you can't?" His jaw tightened. "Then we wait until he reaches us." Claire watched him dial, her heart hammering as the call connected. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Marcus's expression grew darker with each unanswered tone. Finally, he hung up and tried again. Same result. "Could his phone be damaged?" Claire asked, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "Maybe. Or he could be in a situation where he can't answer." Marcus set down the receiver. "Either way, we're on our own until I can establish contact with someone I trust." "What about Elena?" The question hung in the air. Marcus's face went carefully blank. "I saw her go down, Ms. Weller. I don't know if she made it out." The words hit like a physical blow. Claire thought of the older woman's kindness, her steady presence, the way she'd shoved Claire toward the tunnel and stayed behind to buy time. The gunshot she'd heard as she ran echoed in her memory, and she had to press her hand to her mouth to keep from being sick. "She saved us," Claire whispered. "She did her job." Marcus's voice was rough. "And we honor that by staying alive and keeping the boys safe. That's what she would want." Noah stirred on the couch, whimpering in his sleep. Claire went to him automatically, checking his temperature, his breathing, the IV port that Dr. Patel had insisted they maintain for emergency medication delivery. Everything seemed stable, but he was due for his next round of medication in 3 hours, and she had no idea if Marcus had thought to grab the medical bag in their desperate escape. "Do we have his medications?" she asked. Marcus crossed to a duffel bag he'd thrown in the SUV and unzipped it. Inside was Noah's entire medical kit, carefully organized and complete. Mr. Moretti had emergency supplies staged at every safe house, everything the boy needs for at least 2 weeks. Relief flooded through her, so intense it made her dizzy. "Thank you. Thank Mr. Moretti. He's the one who thought of everything." Marcus pulled out another bag. There's clothes for both of you here, too. He had Elena keep sizes updated monthly. Claire stared at the bag, at the evidence of Rafe's meticulous planning, and felt something crack open in her chest. He'd prepared for this, had known it was possible, maybe even probable, and had made sure that if the worst happened, she and Noah would have what they needed to survive. Marcus, what happened to him? The question came out smaller than she intended. The meeting he went to, was it real or was it a trap? I don't know. He was supposed to meet a contact who claimed to have intel on Volkov's next shipment. When I tried to warn him about the breach, the call went straight to voicemail. I sent the emergency signal. Marcus pulled out his phone again, showing her a message thread. He always responds to that within 2 minutes. It's been 47 minutes. The implication was clear. Either Rafe was incapacitated, captured, or dead. Claire's hands started shaking again. She curled them into fists, forcing herself to breathe, to think, to not fall apart when Noah needed her steady. So what do? We wait. We stay alert. And we trust that Mr. Moretti is doing whatever it takes to get back to you and his son. Marcus moved to the window, peering out through a gap in the curtains. He's survived worse than this, Ms. Weller. Don't count him out yet. But the hours crawled by with no word. Claire fed Noah, changed him, administered his medication on schedule, while Marcus maintained watch and tried periodically to reach anyone from Rafe's network. The few calls that connected went to people who claimed to know nothing about the attack, which only made Marcus more suspicious and Claire more terrified. Night fell. Marcus refused to turn on more than a single lamp, keeping the cabin dark enough that anyone watching from outside wouldn't know they were there. Claire tried to sleep on the couch with Noah curled against her, but every sound, every creak of settling wood, every rustle of wind through the trees jerked her back to wakefulness with her heart racing. Around 2 a.m, Marcus's phone finally rang. He answered it before the second ring, his voice tight with controlled urgency. Marcus? Claire sat up, straining to hear the voice on the other end. She couldn't make out words, but the tone was unmistakable, clipped, authoritative, alive. Marcus's shoulders dropped fractionally, the first sign of relief she'd seen from him since they'd fled the estate. Understood. ETA? A pause. Copy that. We'll be ready. He ended the call and turned to Claire. That was Mr. Moretti. He's alive. He's coming here. The relief was so overwhelming that Claire actually felt lightheaded. When? 30 minutes, maybe less. Marcus was already moving, checking weapons, scanning the perimeter through the windows. He's bringing reinforcements, said to stay inside until he gives the all clear. Claire wanted to ask what had happened, where he'd been, if he was hurt. But Marcus was focused on security protocols and she knew better than to distract him. So she held Noah close and watched the dark woods beyond the window and counted down the minutes until she would see Rafe again and know for certain that he was whole. 28 minutes later, headlights cut through the darkness. 2 vehicles approaching fast but not recklessly. Marcus positioned himself by the door, gun drawn but pointed at the floor. The cars stopped. Doors opened. And then Rafe's voice, calling out the all-clear code that made Marcus finally lower his weapon. Claire was on her feet before she thought about it, crossing to the door as Marcus opened it. And there was Rafe, alive, real, moving toward the cabin with 4 armed men flanking him. His face was bruised, his jacket torn, and there was blood on his collar that definitely wasn't his own. But his eyes found hers immediately, and the naked relief in them mirrored everything she was feeling. He took the porch steps 2 at a time. Claire, Noah. We're okay. We're both okay. She wanted to run to him, to throw her arms around him and confirm that he was solid and safe, but she was holding Noah and Rafe was surrounded by his security team, and the moment felt too fragile for the emotion burning through her. Rafe stopped just inside the door, his gaze moving over her and Noah with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. You're not hurt? No, Marcus got us out. She looked past him at Marcus, who was conferring with one of the new arrivals. What happened to you? Ambush. The contact was one of Volkov's people wearing a wire. They had a kill team waiting. His voice was flat, factual, but she could see the fury simmering beneath the surface. I dealt with it. The implication in those 4 words made Claire's stomach turn. She didn't ask for details, didn't want to know how many people had died and whatever violence had kept Rafe away, while his home was being attacked. "Elena," she said instead. Marcus said, "She's alive." Rafe's expression softened fractionally. "Critical condition, but stable. I have her at a private facility with round-the-clock security. She took 2 bullets getting you out of that safe room." Claire's eyes burned. "I need to see her." "You will. Once it's safe." He finally stepped close enough to reach out, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. The touch was gentle, reverent, completely at odds with the violence written all over him. "I'm sorry, Claire. I should have been there. Should have. You couldn't have known." "I should have." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "But I know now, and I know who sold us out." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus turned sharply from his conversation. "Who?" "Thomas Brennan, one of the lawyers on my legal team. Volkov had him on payroll for 6 months, feeding information about our operations, my schedule, the estate's security protocols." Rafe's voice was ice. "He's the one who gave them the safe room codes. He's also the one who told them when I'd be out of the house." Claire's mind raced back through the past few weeks. The legal files she'd been working on, the emails she'd exchanged with Rafe's attorneys. "I communicated with him about the contract work. Did I—" "You didn't do anything wrong." Rafe's hand dropped from her face. "He was feeding them information long before you arrived, but he did use your presence, and Noah's, to give Volkov the leverage he needed to make his move." His jaw clenched. "He won't be a problem anymore." The finality in those words left no room for interpretation. Claire should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual admission of what was clearly a death sentence. But all she felt was a grim satisfaction that the man who'd endangered her son was no longer a threat. "What happens now?" she asked. Rafe looked at Marcus, then back to her. "Now we finish this. Volkov made a move on my family. That means he's declared total war, and I'm going to give him exactly what he asked for." He paused. "But I need to know that you and Noah are secure first. There's another safe house further north, more isolated. I'm sending you there with Marcus and a full security team until this is over." "How long will that take?" "However long it takes." He glanced at Noah, sleeping peacefully against Claire's shoulder, oblivious to the chaos swirling around him. "Days, maybe a week." "And you?" "I'll be hunting." The word was simple, direct, terrifying. Volkov exposed himself tonight, made mistakes, left trails. I'm going to follow every single one of them until I find him, and then I'm going to end this permanently. Claire wanted to argue, to tell him that revenge wasn't worth his life, that Noah needed his father alive more than he needed Volkov dead. But looking into Rafe's eyes, seeing the cold, absolute determination there, she knew it wouldn't matter. This was happening. The only question was whether she was going to fight him on it, or accept that this was who he was and what his world demanded. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said finally. "I promise I'll come back." It wasn't the same thing, but it was all he could offer. "Marcus, get them ready to move. I want them at the northern site before dawn." The next hour was a blur of preparation and coordination. Claire packed what little they'd brought to the cabin while Marcus and Rafe's team swept the area and planned the route. Noah woke briefly, fussy and confused by all the movement, but settled when Claire fed him. She tried to memorize the weight of him in her arms, the soft sound of his breathing, the way his tiny hand curled around her finger. If something went wrong, if Rafe didn't come back, if Volkov found them despite all the precautions, these moments might be all she had left of the fragile safety they'd built. Rafe appeared in the doorway as she was finishing Noah's bottle. He stood there for a long moment, just watching them, his expression unreadable. "Can I hold him?" he asked quietly. Claire nodded, transferring Noah carefully into his father's arms. Rafe held him like something infinitely precious and infinitely breakable, his large hands cradling the baby with a tenderness that made Claire's throat tight. "Hey, little man," he murmured. "You're being so brave, so strong, just like your mama." He pressed a kiss to Noah's forehead. "I'm going to make sure you grow up safe. I promise you that. Whatever it takes." Noah yawned and grabbed at Rafe's collar, his expression serene and trusting. Rafe's face cracked just for a second, showing the fear and love underneath the controlled facade. "I've never been afraid before," he said, so quietly Claire almost didn't hear it. Not really. Not the way I am right now. Because I've never had something I couldn't afford to lose. Claire stepped close, her hand finding his arm. Then don't lose. Come back to us. I will. He looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. I need you to know something, Claire. In case... Don't. In case, he repeated firmly. You need to know that everything I have is in your name and Noah's. The estate, the legitimate businesses, the accounts. Marcus has all the legal documentation. If something happens to me, you'll be protected, provided for. And there are people, good people, who will make sure Volkov can never touch you. Rafe, please. And you need to know that these past few weeks, having you here, getting to know my son, building something that felt like a family, his voice roughened. It's been the best part of my life. Even with everything else. Especially with everything else. Claire's eyes were burning. You can't say things like that and then walk away into a war. I have to, because I need you to understand what you mean to me, what Noah means to me. So that when I come back, not if, when, you'll know it's not just about protection or obligation. It's about... He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. It's about wanting to be the man you both deserve. She kissed him. Didn't plan it, didn't think about it, just rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. He froze for a heartbeat, Noah still secure in his arms, and then kissed her back with a desperation that spoke of everything they hadn't said and might never get the chance to. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Rafe rested his forehead against hers. I'll come back, he whispered. I swear it. You better. Her voice was fierce. Because we're not doing this alone again. You hear me? We're a team now, all three of us. A team, he smiled, small and genuine. I like that. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression apologetic. Sir, we need to move. Sun's coming up in 90 minutes. Rafe handed Noah back to Claire with obvious reluctance. Be safe. Trust Marcus. And don't open that door for anyone who doesn't give you the code word. What's the code word? Remission. His eyes held hers. Because that's what we're fighting for. Noah's health. Our future. A life where we're not running anymore. Then he was gone, striding out into the pre-dawn darkness with his team flanking him. Claire heard car doors, engines starting, the crunch of gravel as the vehicles pulled away. And then silence, broken only by Noah's soft breathing and her own hammering heart. Come on, Ms. Weller, Marcus said gently. Time to go. The northern safe house was even more isolated than the cabin, a converted hunting lodge at the end of a logging road that hadn't been maintained in years. Marcus had driven with 2 other vehicles following, all of them running dark and taking a route so convoluted that Claire lost track of where they were within the first hour. By the time they arrived, the sun was fully up and Noah was awake and cranky from the long car ride. The lodge was larger than the cabin, with multiple bedrooms and a kitchen that actually had running water. Marcus's team, 6 men total, all hard-eyed and competent, secured the perimeter while Claire got Noah settled in a room that had clearly been prepared in advance. Fresh linens on the bed, medical supplies already stocked, even a few toys that looked brand new. Rafe had thought of everything. Again. The first day passed in tense silence. Claire tried to maintain Noah's routine, feeding, playing, medication on schedule, while the security team ran shifts and Marcus made periodic calls on the secure landline. No news, no updates, just the maddening uncertainty of not knowing what was happening beyond their isolated bubble. The second day Elena called. Marcus handed Claire the phone with a careful expression. She insisted on speaking to you. Claire took it with shaking hands. Elena? Hello, dear? The older woman's voice was weak but unmistakably hers. I hear you and the boy made it out safely. Thanks to you. Claire's eyes filled with tears. You saved us. You saved Noah. I did my job, just as Raphael is doing his now. A pause, labored breathing. Claire, I need you to listen to me. What's coming? What Raphael is doing? It's going to be brutal, final, the kind of thing that doesn't leave room for half measures or mercy. When it's over, the man who comes back to you won't be the same as the one who left. Claire's stomach knotted. What are you saying? I'm saying that violence changes people, even when it's necessary, especially when it's necessary. Elena's voice softened. But underneath it all, he'll still be the man who loves you, and that boy more than his own life. Don't forget that, even when it's hard to see past the blood. Elena, I'm tired, dear. The medication makes me foggy. But I needed to tell you that, needed you to understand what you're choosing when you choose him. The line went dead. Claire stood there with the phone in her hand, Elena's words echoing in her mind. The man who comes back won't be the same as the one who left. She thought about Rafe's bruised face, the blood on his collar, the cold finality in his voice when he talked about Brennan and Volkov. She thought about the way he'd held Noah, the tenderness in his touch, the fear he'd admitted to feeling, and she realized Elena was right. She was choosing this, choosing him, choosing a life where love and violence were so intertwined they couldn't be separated. The only question was whether she could live with that choice. The third day, everything went wrong. Claire was reading to Noah in the living room when the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a surge, just instant, complete darkness. Marcus was moving before she could even react, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the back of the lodge. "What's happening?" she gasped. "Power's on a separate grid. Someone cut it deliberately." His voice was grim. "Get to the panic room. Now." But they didn't make it. The front door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and smoke. Men poured in, 5, 6 more, all armed, all moving with military precision. Marcus shoved Claire behind him and opened fire. His muzzle flashed brilliant in the darkness. Return fire lit up the room. Marcus went down with a grunt, blood blooming on his shoulder. Claire screamed and dropped to cover Noah with her body as bullets punched through the walls above them. The security team was engaging from other positions, the lodge erupting into a firefight that shook the walls and filled the air with the stench of cordite and blood. Someone grabbed Claire from behind. She fought, kicking and clawing, but he was too strong, already dragging her toward the shattered front door. Noah was shrieking, terrified, and Claire held him so tight she was probably hurting him, but she couldn't let go, couldn't let them take him. The man dragging her suddenly released her and dropped. Claire hit the floor hard, barely managing to keep Noah's head from striking the wood. She looked up through the smoke and chaos and saw a figure silhouetted in the doorway, backlit by dawn light, gun raised and firing with mechanical precision. Rafe. He moved through the lodge like death itself, taking down Volkov's men with shots that didn't miss. Behind him came more of his people, a second wave that turned the tide in seconds. The firefight became a massacre. Volkov's team tried to retreat and were cut down, tried to surrender and were shot anyway. No mercy, no quarter. It was over in less than 2 minutes. Rafe crossed to Claire through the carnage, holstering his weapon. His face was spattered with blood, his eyes dark and dangerous, but his hands were gentle when he reached down to help her up. "Are you hurt?" His voice was hoarse, strained. "No, I don't think so." Claire looked at Noah, running her hands over him frantically. "The baby." "Let me see him." She handed Noah over with shaking hands. Rafe examined him with the same methodical care she'd just used, checking for injuries, blood, anything wrong. Noah was still crying but seemed unhurt, just terrified by the noise and chaos. "He's okay," Rafe said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "He's okay." Claire looked around the destroyed lodge, bodies on the floor, Marcus being tended to by one of Rafe's men, conscious but bleeding badly. Bullet holes in every wall. The smell of death thick in the air. "How did they find us?" she whispered. "They didn't." Rafe's expression was grim. "I led them here." Claire stared at him. "What?" "I let it leak that you were here, made it look like a security flaw they could exploit. And when Volkov sent his team," Rafe gestured at the bodies. "I was waiting with mine." "You used us as bait?" The words came out flat, shocked. "I used the location as bait. You were never in real danger. I had men positioned in the woods, watching every approach. The second Volkov's team moved in, we moved in behind them." His jaw clenched. "But I didn't account for them cutting the power first. That gave them 30 seconds more than I wanted. I'm sorry." Claire wanted to be furious, wanted to scream at him for the risk, for not telling her, for treating her and Noah like pieces on a chessboard. But looking at the bodies, at the men who would have taken her son, who would have used him against Rafe, who would have killed them both when they'd served their purpose, she couldn't summon the anger. "Is it over?" she asked instead. "Is Volkov dead?" The word was final. Absolute. "I killed him myself 3 hours ago. This was his last team, his final play. There's no one left to come after you." Claire sagged against him, the adrenaline finally draining away and leaving her hollow and exhausted. Rafe caught her, one arm around her waist, while he still held Noah with the other, anchoring them both. "It's over," he repeated, softer now. "You're safe. Noah's safe. It's finally over." And despite everything, the blood, the bodies, the violence that would haunt her dreams for years, Claire believed him. They didn't go back to the estate. Not immediately. Rafe had the bodies removed, the lodge cleaned and secured, and then he drove Claire and Noah to yet another property. This one, a modern house on Bainbridge Island with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Sound. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost aggressive after the violence of the past 72 hours. All clean lines and natural light, and the kind of peace that seemed impossible to Claire's frayed nerves. Marcus was taken to the same private facility where Elena was recovering. The bullet had gone clean through his shoulder, missing anything vital, and the doctors assured Rafe he'd be back on duty within 6 weeks. Claire had held his hand before they'd loaded him into the medical transport, tears streaming down her face as she thanked him for saving her life. He'd squeezed back once, his expression stoic, and told her it was his honor. Now, standing in the island house's pristine kitchen, while Rafe made coffee and Noah napped in a portable crib that had appeared from somewhere, Claire felt like she was walking through someone else's life. The past month had been a fever dream of fear and violence and impossible choices, and now that it was over, she didn't know how to process any of it. "You should eat something," Rafe said, setting a mug in front of her. He'd showered and changed into clean clothes, but there were still bruises on his knuckles and a cut along his jaw that he hadn't bothered to bandage. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" Claire couldn't remember. "I'm not hungry." "Claire," his voice was gentle but firm. "You need to keep your strength up, for Noah, if not for yourself." She picked up the mug, more to have something to do with her hands than because she wanted coffee. "Rafe, what you did at the lodge, using us as bait, was necessary." He sat across from her, his dark eyes meeting hers without flinching. "Volkov wasn't going to stop. Every day he was alive was another day you and Noah were in danger. I needed to draw him out, needed to force a confrontation on my terms, and I needed bait he couldn't ignore." "You could have told me." "Would you have agreed?" The question hung between them. Claire wanted to say yes, that she would have understood the strategy, accepted the risk. But they both knew the truth. She would have fought him, would have demanded another way, a safer plan, something that didn't put Noah in the crosshairs, even theoretically. "No," she admitted. "I wouldn't have. Then I made the choice I had to make, and I'd make it again." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "But I also made sure that if anything went wrong, you were protected. I had 20 men in those woods, Claire. Thermal imaging, overwatch positions, escape routes. You were never truly alone." "It felt alone." Her voice cracked. "When the lights went out and the shooting started, it felt very alone." Rafe's jaw tightened. "I know, and I'm sorry for that. But it's over now. Volkov is dead. His organization is scattered. The threat is neutralized. What about the next threat? The next Volkov who decides your family is a weakness to exploit?" The question had been building in Claire's mind since the lodge, since she'd held Noah while bullets flew overhead and realized that this could happen again. Would happen again, as long as Rafe lived the life he lived. "There won't be a next one," Rafe said quietly. "Because I'm done." Claire stared at him. "What?" "I'm out. The territory disputes, the criminal operations, all of it. I'm walking away." He stood and moved to the windows, looking out at the water. "I've been building legitimate businesses for years, real estate, investments, tech companies. They're profitable enough to support the lifestyle I want. The illegal side was always about power and legacy and proving something to people who are mostly dead now anyway. But it's not worth Noah's life, or yours." Claire's heart was pounding. "You can't just walk away from that world, can you?" I can if I make it clear that touching my family means total war. That's the message I sent with Volkov. Complete annihilation of anyone who even thinks about using you as leverage. He turned to face her. There'll be a transition period. Territories to hand over, alliances to restructure. But within 6 months, Rafael Moretti will be nothing more than a wealthy businessman with a complicated past. Someone not worth the effort of going after. And you think they'll just let you go? They won't have a choice. I'm keeping enough of the infrastructure to make retaliation costly, but I'm removing myself from the day-to-day operations. It's the deal I've already started negotiating. His expression was resolute. I told you I'd do whatever it took to keep Noah safe. This is what it takes. Claire felt tears burning her eyes again. You'd give up everything you've built? Everything you are? I'm not giving up everything. I'm choosing what matters. He crossed back to her, crouching down so they were eye level. I'm choosing you and Noah. I'm choosing a life where my son can go to school without armed guards, where you can leave the house without looking over your shoulder, where we can build something real instead of just surviving. Rafe, I love you, Claire. The words were simple, direct, devastating. I've loved you since you walked into that bar 18 months ago and looked at me like I was just a man instead of a name, people whispered. And I love the life we could have if we're brave enough to actually reach for it. Claire's hands were shaking. I don't know if I can do this. Live in your world, even the legitimate parts. Trust that the violence is really over. Then don't trust it. Not yet. He took her hands in his. Just trust me. Give me 6 months to prove that I can be the man you need, the father Noah deserves. And if I fail, if this life is too much or I'm not enough, then we'll figure out what comes next, together. She looked into his eyes, dark and intense and absolutely sincere, and realized she'd already made her choice. Had made it when she called him for help. Had made it when she'd kissed him in the cabin. Had made it every time she'd chosen to stay instead of run. Okay, she whispered. 6 months. The relief on his face was staggering. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. They stayed like that until Noah woke with a cry, and then Rafe released her so she could tend to their son. The next weeks were a study in careful reconstruction. They stayed on the island while Rafe orchestrated what he called his exit strategy. Meetings with lawyers and accountants, negotiations with the people who would inherit his territories, quiet conversations with law enforcement about immunity deals and cooperation agreements. Claire watched it unfold from a distance, simultaneously fascinated and horrified by the complexity of dismantling a criminal empire. She visited Elena twice, watching the older woman's slow but steady recovery with a mix of guilt and gratitude. Elena never blamed her for the injuries, never suggested that calling Rafe had been a mistake. Instead, she held Claire's hand and told her stories about Rafe as a young man, reckless and angry and determined to prove himself worthy of a legacy that had nearly destroyed him. He's different with you, Elena said during the second visit, her voice still weak but her eyes sharp. Softer, more willing to bend instead of break. That's rare, dear. Don't waste it. I'm trying not to, Claire said, but I'm scared of who he was, who he might become again if things go wrong. We're all capable of violence when the people we love are threatened. The question isn't whether he's violent, it's whether he can control it, channel it, use it only when absolutely necessary. Elena's grip tightened. And from what I've seen, he can. For you and Noah, he'll be whatever you need him to be. Noah's treatment continued to show improvement. Dr. Patel visited the island house twice a week, and each appointment brought better news. The genetic markers from Rafe's family history had given her the insight she needed to fine-tune the chemotherapy protocol, and Noah's body was finally responding the way it should. His energy increased, the bruises faded, his smile came easier and more often. I'm cautiously optimistic, Dr. Patel said during a 6-week checkup, reviewing the latest blood work. If this trend continues, we could be looking at full remission within 3 to 4 months. Claire had to sit down, the relief so intense it made her dizzy. Rafe stood behind her chair, his hands on her shoulders, and when she looked up at him, there were tears in his eyes. Thank you, he said to Dr. Patel, his voice rough, for everything. Thank the genetics, the doctor replied with a small smile. And thank your son's fighting spirit. He's a strong little boy. That night, after Noah was asleep and the house was quiet, Claire and Rafe sat on the deck overlooking the water. The summer evening was cool and clear, stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "I've been thinking about what comes next," Claire said, "after the 6 months, after you've transitioned out of the criminal operations." "And?" Rafe's voice was carefully neutral. "And I think we should get married." He turned to stare at her, something like shock crossing his face. "You, what?" "I think we should get married," she repeated, stronger now. "Not because of Noah, though that's part of it, and not because I'm trying to legitimize this relationship or make it more acceptable, but because I love you, and because I want to choose this life with you deliberately, not just fall into it by circumstance." Rafe was silent for a long moment. Then he stood and pulled a small box from his pocket. "I was going to wait. Do this properly, with flowers and a speech and the whole romantic production. But since you've already asked..." He opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the fading light and threw it back in brilliant flashes. "Claire Weller, will you marry me?" She laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. "I just asked you, and I'm answering, with a question of my own." His smile was soft, vulnerable. "So what do you say? Will you take this dangerous, complicated, deeply imperfect man and make him better just by choosing him every day?" Claire stood and took the box from his hands, examining the ring more closely. It was beautiful, a single diamond on a platinum band, elegant without being ostentatious. Exactly what she would have chosen if he'd asked her preference. "Yes," she said, "on one condition." "Name it." "We do this honestly. No more secrets about the business, the transition, any of it. You tell me what's happening, even when it's ugly or complicated. We're partners, Rafe. In everything." "Partners," he agreed. "In everything." She slipped the ring on her own finger. It fit perfectly, because of course he'd somehow gotten her size right, and then kissed him under the emerging stars. The wedding happened 3 months later, on a crisp October afternoon at the estate. The property had been rebuilt after the attack, stronger and more secure, but also more open. Rafe had removed the highest walls, replaced the armed checkpoints with regular security, and turned part of the grounds into a garden that Claire had helped design. It was a space that felt like hope instead of fortification. The ceremony was small. Elena, recovered enough to stand as witness, wore silver and wept openly. Marcus, his arm still in a sling but improving daily, stood stoic and proud beside Rafe. Dr. Patel attended with her wife, both of them beaming, and a handful of Rafe's most trusted people, the ones who were transitioning with him into legitimate business, who had proven their loyalty not with violence but with honest work, filled out the rest of the seats. Noah, 13 months old and in full remission, toddled down the aisle in a tiny suit, clutching Elena's hand and grinning at everyone like he was the star of the show, which, Claire supposed, he was. This whole impossible journey had started with him, with her desperate call to save his life. And now here they were, alive, together, building something that looked almost like normal. The officiant was brief and professional, reading the standard vows with appropriate solemnity. But when it came time for personal statements, Rafe pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I'm not good at this," he started, his voice carrying across the small gathering. "The emotional speeches, the public declarations. It's not who I was raised to be. But Claire asked me to be honest, so here's the truth." He looked at her, his dark eyes steady. 18 months ago, I met a woman in a bar who didn't know who I was. Didn't care about my name or my power or what I could do for her. She just saw me. And for 3 months, I got to be just a man instead of a legacy. Then she left, and I understood why. Because what I was, what I did, wasn't something she could accept. Wasn't something she should accept. He paused, folding the paper. But then she called. Because our son was dying, and she needed help. And I got a second chance to be the man she'd seen in that bar. Not the crime boss, not the enforcer, just Raphael, just Rafe. A father, a partner, someone worth choosing. His voice roughened. "I don't deserve this, don't deserve you or Noah or the life we're building, but I swear I will spend every day trying to be worthy of it, of you." Claire's vision blurred with tears. When it was her turn, she kept it simple. "I was terrified to call you. terrified of what it would mean, what I'd be opening the door to, and I was right to be scared. This hasn't been easy. It's been violent and complicated, and there were moments I thought we wouldn't survive it. But we did. Because you fought for us. Because you were willing to change everything you were to protect what we could become. And that's why I'm choosing you. Not despite the danger, but because of how you handled it. Because you proved that love is worth the risk. They exchanged rings, simple platinum bands that matched the engagement ring. The officiant pronounced them married. And when Rafe kissed her, it felt like a promise being kept. The reception was held in the garden Claire had designed, with food Elena had supervised and music that was more joyful than elegant. Noah delighted everyone by taking his first independent steps, stumbling from Claire to Rafe and back again while the guests cheered. Dr. Patel cornered Claire to share the news that Noah's latest scans showed no trace of cancer, that they could start talking about long-term remission and normal childhood instead of treatment protocols and hospital visits. "He's going to be okay," Dr. Patel said, squeezing Claire's hand. "Your son is going to have a normal, healthy life." Claire cried again, happy tears this time, and when Rafe found her, he simply held her and let her fall apart from relief. As the sun set and the party wound down, Rafe pulled Claire aside to the garden's edge where they could see the whole property spread out before them. The house glowed with warm light. Music and laughter drifted from the reception. Noah was visible through the windows, being passed between Elena and Marcus like a beloved trophy. "We did it," Claire said softly. "We actually did it." "We did," Rafe agreed. "Though I think you did most of the heavy lifting. You saved our son's life. I think that counts for something." "We saved his life. Together." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I want you to know that I meant what I said about being worthy of this. I know I can't erase what I was, can't pretend the violence never happened, but I can make sure it's in the past, that from here on, the life we build is clean." "I know." And she did. She'd watched him negotiate his exit from the criminal world with the same ruthless efficiency he'd once used to expand it. Watched him redirect his energy into building something legitimate and lasting. Watched him become a father who read bedtime stories and changed diapers and worried about developmental milestones with the same intensity he'd once brought to territory disputes. He was different. They both were. Changed by violence and fear and the desperate love of a child who'd needed them to be better than they'd thought possible. "What happens now?" she asked. Rafe smiled, the expression genuine and unguarded. "Now we live. We raise Noah. We grow old together. We have arguments about whose turn it is to handle the 3 a.m., feeding, and whether he's old enough for a dog, and what college he should apply to someday." "That sounds boring." "It sounds perfect." He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "I've had enough excitement for several lifetimes. I'm ready for boring." Claire laughed and wrapped her arms around him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. This man who'd been a stranger, then a lover, then a threat, then a protector, and finally a partner. This man who'd turned his entire world upside down for a child he'd only just learned existed. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Both of you. More than I knew I could love anything." They stood there as the stars came out, watching their son play through the windows, surrounded by people who'd become family through fire and blood and impossible choices. And Claire let herself believe, finally, that this could last, that they could build a life here. Not perfect, not simple, but theirs. 6 months became a year. The transition from criminal operations to legitimate business was completed without major incident, though there were moments when Claire saw the old Rafe surface, the cold decisiveness, the willingness to do what needed to be done. But he always came back to her and Noah, always chose family over power when it mattered. Noah's second birthday was celebrated with a party in the same garden where they'd been married. He was running now, laughing, completely healthy according to every test Dr. Patel ran. The cancer was gone, leaving only the faint memory of needles and hospital rooms that would fade as he grew. Claire had gone back to practicing law. Not at her old firm, but at a small practice that specialized in family advocacy and children's rights. It was meaningful work that let her use her skills for something that mattered. Rafe supported it completely, even adjusting his schedule so he could handle Noah's afternoon routine while she worked. They fell into rhythms, morning coffee together while Noah destroyed his breakfast, evenings in the library, reading stories until Noah's eyes drooped, weekends exploring the city as a family, ordinary and unremarkable, and exactly what Claire had once thought impossible. Elena had recovered fully and returned to managing the household, though now it was less fortress and more home. Marcus had transitioned to heading Rafe's legitimate security operations, protecting assets instead of enforcing territory. And the few members of Rafe's old world who still kept in contact did so with respect and distance, acknowledging that this chapter of his life was closed. One night, almost 2 years after that first desperate phone call, Claire found Rafe standing in Noah's doorway, watching their son sleep. She came up beside him and took his hand. "What are you thinking about?" she asked quietly. "How different this is from what I expected my life to be." He glanced at her, his expression soft. "I thought I'd die young and violent. Thought that was just the price of the life I'd chosen. But then you called and Noah existed, and suddenly dying wasn't an option anymore. Living became the only thing that mattered." "Any regrets? About leaving that world?" "Not even one." He squeezed her hand. "Every decision I've made since you came back into my life has been about building something instead of destroying it, about creation instead of control. And I've never been happier." Claire leaned her head against his shoulder. "Noah asked me today if you were always going to be here, if you were the forever kind of daddy." "What did you tell him?" "I told him yes, that you're the forever kind." Rafe's arm came around her waist. "Damn right I am. I didn't fight this hard to build this life just to walk away from it. You're stuck with me, Claire Moretti, both of you." "Good," she smiled, turning to kiss him properly, "because I'm not letting you go either." They stood there in Noah's doorway, watching their son breathe in the peaceful sleep of a child who'd never know how close he'd come to not having this life, how his mere existence had changed everything, how one desperate call had become the catalyst for transformation neither of his parents had thought possible. What began as a medical crisis had become a love story. What started with violence and fear had ended with vows and gardens and a future that stretched out bright and clean. And standing there in the quiet house, surrounded by the life they'd built from ashes and impossible choices, Claire finally let go of the last threads of doubt. This was real. This was lasting. This was the family they'd fought for, bled for, chosen again and again when the easier path would have been to walk away. Rafe had kept his promise. He'd come back to them every single time. He'd proven that love could be stronger than legacy, that family could matter more than power. And in doing so, he'd become exactly the man Noah needed as a father and Claire needed as a partner. Not perfect, not simple, but wholly, completely theirs. They moved forward together. No secrets, no escape, no later. Just the three of them, and the life they'd earned in the garden where bullets had once flown and now only laughter echoed. Just Raphael and Claire and Noah Moretti, writing their story one ordinary, extraordinary day at a time. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.